What kind of family did you grow up in? Maybe describe your family, one word. You know, a lot of us in this country, we were sort of taught like we have this ideal family. They're called the Joneses. And most of the rest of the families in our country were like trying to keep up with these Joneses, you know, the Jones family, you know. Well, in my family, it was a little different. We had another family that was sort of our model. Da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. We were trying to keep up with the Addams family because we were kind of a freaky crew. Or you can imagine we were closer to the Clampetts. I don't know. We were somewhere in there between the Clampetts and the Addams family. And when you think about the story of the Bible, then we're all part of Adam's family when you think about it. We're all in that same workshop of community where we learn our first lessons about what it means to be in relationship with other people, right? For some of us, healthy families, man, it's good. Mom and dad, role models, you know. Brothers and sisters love each other, you know, get along most of the time, you know. But the truth is some families have a lot of chaos, you know. In fact, through the years of pastoring, many people I've known have found a secondary family in the body of Christ, in the church, in the family of God, because their previous families were not healthy. They were places where they were hurt, and there was a history of pain and just a lot of hurt. And so in those situations, the church really becomes their real family. And Christ meant for us to have this kind of relationship. The old song says, you'll notice we say brother and sister around here, right? Remember that? So glad I'm a part of the family of God, and I'm not even going to sing. But, you know, but we don't really talk about that as much anymore. We are part of a family that God created. God created the ideal of family of mother and father, children, but he also created this other family, this family that meets the need of community for all of us, because all of us have a need for community. We're in part 4 of this series called Talk Is, and you know, that blank is usually filled in with what? Talk is cheap, right? First week, Trent talked about action, that we can't just talk, we have to put words into action. So talk needs to be transferred to action because talk is cheap. Then we talked about giving. In our giving, we can put our money where our mouth is in our giving. And we talked about talk is serving, that we don't just talk about serving God, but that we actually get involved and serve his people and the world in the way that he calls us to do. Today we're going to talk about community. We're going to talk about this relationship that we have within Christ's church, within the family of God in which we're called to participate. We can talk about that. We can sing about that, the family of God, all that. We can even call each other brother and sister, but talk is cheap, you know. And then we realize that we even called to connect with love, to be a light into the world, salt into the earth, a source of God's image in the world, where people can see what God's love is like because of the way we love our neighbors, the way we love each other. Talk is cheap. How do we really begin to do that? Do you know God is he's not really in the rehab business. It's not just about putting some paint on the old house. He's really in the total home makeover. He's really about going deep into our lives and repairing not just the things on the surface, but our relationships and our relationships with one another. And there is something in every one of our hearts that really wants meaningful community and relationships. We can get along without it. We can even be brave and pretend that we don't need it. We're very individualistic in this country. We all want to be John Wayne, you know. But the truth is that we need each other, and church should be the best place to confess that. I need you, and you need me. And we have a relationship with one another that was born in the understanding of who Jesus is. And he called us into this family of God, a family not where just we happen to be born, but a family into which we were born again, into these relationships of who God called us to be. If we look to Jesus for a context of how that looks and how Jesus practices that in his own life, because it is him we follow, how do we find Jesus in the context of, say, a worshiping community or a community of faith or a congregation? Well, Luke gives us a picture of that in Luke chapter 6. It shows Jesus going to his congregation, if you will. He's going into the synagogue on a Sabbath day, and let's see what Jesus does. The description that Luke gives us is like this. On another Sabbath, he went into the synagogue and was teaching. And a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking and said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Get up, stand up, right here in front of everyone." So he got up and stood there. Now, notice right here that when Jesus comes into the congregation, his family of faith, his worshiping community, notice where his eyes go. Jesus is looking in this congregation for those who are broken. He's looking for the broken ones who oftentimes are on the margins, those who are on the edges or in the back. He's looking for those in the congregation. He's looking for them to acknowledge their humanity, to acknowledge that they're important, to bring them out, and so that he can heal them. How different are the eyes of the Pharisees, the religious folks, the people who kind of see the congregation as their place to assert their leadership and their power, and their kind of place of privilege. They don't see like Jesus sees. They're looking at Jesus to see if he steps out of line, to see if he keeps the rules of the house, to see if he does the right thing in their eyes or if he does the wrong thing. Jesus is looking to help those in the congregation to notice what he sees, and that's why he has the man with the broken hand to stand up, that people can see what he sees. Look, there's someone here who's broken. I see them. Do you see them? And then Jesus having them stand up. He wants to correct their religious assumptions. That is, that this is a congregation or a gathering, a community of those who don't have any problems, who don't have any broken hands, who don't have any withered parts in their life, who don't have any brokenness. Jesus has the man stand up. And then he says to them, "I ask you which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or evil, to save life or destroy it. You tell me what's good. You tell me what's right when you know that there's someone here who's broken. Is it better to keep some rule that you rule this congregation with, or is it better to bring healing to those who are broken?" So then he looked around at them all, and then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And like a flower blooming, his hand came back to life. His hand was completely restored. But the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, they were furious. And they began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. Very different picture of community as Jesus sees it and as the religious saw it. And nothing stops Jesus from his task. He heals and loves in spite of those who would oppose him or criticize or judge. Now, following this bad experience, what does Jesus do? Well, he needs to go off by himself and pray. You might need to do that too. We all might need to do that. Luke tells us that he goes up on a mountainside. One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray. And he spent the night praying to God. And when morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he designated apostles, those whom he's going to send out. He's been in the congregation. Now he goes to talk to his Father. All night long he prays, comes down and finds those who are following him, and from that number, he chooses 12, very important number. 12 sons of Jacob, 12 tribes of Israel. I want 12 disciples. Very important. So he chooses these 12, and this wasn't just like kickball in grade school, You look strong, I'll pick you, you stay down here on the end, right? This is not, God doesn't look just at the outside, he looks at the heart. And so he's also spent all night long praying about this. So this is an informed decision. And look who Jesus chooses. He forms a new community, his small group, if you will. His family, by prayerfully choosing the most unlikely group of 12. And those 12, he would spend the last years of his life, last months of his life, it's so short. He would spend his life loving them, teaching them, eating with them, and doing life with them. And here's the list. Simon, whom he later named Peter, his brother Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon, who was called the Zealot, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Now, those names just fly by us, but if you read the rest of the Gospels and even the New Testament, you'll get to find out that Simon was the big mouth of the bunch. He was always the first to speak. I would think after so many gaffes, he probably had a foot-shaped mouth, that it adapted to the way his foot fitted to it so easily. And Simon's brother, Andy. Two more brothers, James and John, that Jesus actually called the sons of thunder. Now, I always thought, gosh, they must have been like a tag team wrestling pair, They're two brothers, James and John. Philip and Bart, we don't hear much about Philip and Bart. They must have been the introverts of the bunch. They were quiet. You don't hear them talking. You don't find anything about Philip until later in the book of Acts. What do these have in common? Well, all of these, the first group that we mentioned, were fishermen. They operated in the same trade. They had the same job, the humble task of being fishermen, catching fish. And Jesus told them, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. I'm going to help you catch two-legged people. But they also had great differences, and the ones that follow will show you that. Matthew was a tax collector. Everybody hated tax collectors, and you know why? Nobody likes tax collectors. But not only that, Matthew was collecting taxes for Caesar, the Roman ruler. The Rome ruled over Israel in that day. And Matthew, even though he was a Jew, chose to work for the government and take the money of his fellow Jews. Can you imagine? And yet Jesus one day comes by his tax booth and says, Matthew, follow me. And Matthew gets up and leaves the money and goes, follows Jesus. And he becomes part of the 12. And then there's Simon, who is called the Zealot. Now, the Zealots were like just the opposite of Matthew. They could not stand the fact that Gentile, Roman soldiers stood on the street corners of the holy city of Jerusalem and that roamed the streets of his holy country, God's country. These pagans were in charge of everything. In fact, Simon was so upset about it that he belonged to a group called the Zealots, who did everything short of violence and sometimes were accused of violence to get rid of the Romans. Do you see what Jesus has done? He's chosen Matthew, who works for the Romans, who has betrayed his own people to work for the Romans and now is a follower of Jesus. And he's chosen Simon, who was a zealot who'd like to kill every Roman he can find on behalf of Israel, his people. And he's put them in the 12, side by side. There's Thomas, the doubter. We learn more about him later on. There's the good Judas, who is Jameson, son of James. And then there's a bad Judas, Iscariot, who betrays Jesus. All of these 12 are chosen to be part of Christ's community, his family, his small group, those that he spent most of his time with. Can you imagine how small that group would be if Jesus said, I'm just going to choose people who agree with me. I'm going to just choose people that I naturally get along with. I'm just going to choose people who were from my part of the country. I'm just going to choose people that I know beyond a doubt will be faithful. Be a really small group. This is the people he chose. It's a new community. It's a new family for them. And in the life of Jesus, God has stepped into this community that he calls the church, and he starts a chain reaction of relationships of diverse people united not by common interests, not by political party, not by pay scale, class, race, nationality, or agreement. And that has been going on for 2,000 years, this chain reaction. Christ building a community, a family, a people, a congregation, based on the transformation of selfish human beings into the children of God. That's the work of Jesus, and it continues today. The Apostle Paul would go on to talk about it in the most wonderful terms. He says in Colossians 3, here in this community, there's no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all in all. And I don't have time to explain what all those mean, but they're very different from one another. It goes on and says in Galatians, he says what it's really about is that you're all dressed alike. No, there's no uniform, but listen. He says, so in Christ you are all children of God through faith. For all of you were baptized into Christ, all of you who are baptized in Christ Jesus have clothed yourself with Christ. We are those who carry around in us the image of Christ. We wear him like a new suit of clothes, because that old suit of clothes was tattered and dirty. But when we became baptized into Jesus Christ, he clothed us in himself. He's not ashamed to call us his own. In this family, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, there's not male or female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. Not only that, if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed according to the promise. Even those not related to Abraham were brought into his family. Now, God, having sent Christ, calls us to be part of a community that goes beyond family as we know it. You can't bring your restrictions into this family. You can't bring your prejudices into this family. You can't bring your rules into this family. This family has been started by Christ. And he calls us to go beyond family, the family huddle, to form community beyond that. In his Sermon on the Mount, he gives them a preview of what this is going to look like. He says, listen, you're going to follow me? Can I ask you, he says, would If you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do that? Tax collectors like tax collectors, they hang out together, right? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That word perfect there is not about you don't make any mistakes. It's about a consistency of love that says it doesn't matter your label. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what you got going on, what your favorite things are, whatever. I'm going here to love you, not based on my standards, but based on the standard that Christ has set. And that's what it means to follow Jesus, is that we begin to turn away from those things. We begin to love people just because he loves us. There's no boundaries to our love to be part of this Jesus-centered community. He says again in Luke chapter 6, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those to whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting them to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. And then your reward will be great. And you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, therefore, as your Father is merciful. Now, talk is cheap. How many times we've been in a prayer meeting or service and somebody says, I just love everybody. Jesus told me to love everybody. But when it gets down to practical, what do we spend our time doing? Who do we spend our time with? You see, Jesus often taught at the table. That's one of the things I love about him, especially in Luke. He does a lot of his teaching around the dinner table. I love that. It's great. And he's sitting around a table at a certain Pharisee's house, and he starts talking. He's way out of his league. He shouldn't be doing this, but he does. And Jesus said to his host, the one who actually invited him to his table, he said, listen, I got some advice for you. I'm not Martha Stewart or anything. I'm the master. I'm king. I'm Jesus. But let me give you some etiquette about my table and what should be at your table. Jesus says to his host, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back and you'll just be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Who owns your table? Who owns your house? Who owns your yard? Who owns your places of recreation and your places? As followers of Jesus, we give him the right to call us to that. The one who said, a new commandment I give to you, love one another. Not just love one another like you naturally do, but love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples, you're my followers, if you love in the way that I love, if you love one another like I love. Now, you all know what my job is here. Today I'm filling in for Trent, but a lot of my work has been to try to help us as a community, Salem Grace Church of the Nazarene, to be a community that resembles Jesus, a community that really makes disciples who do what Jesus calls them to do, not just what they've always been taught, but to do what Jesus calls us to do. And we are all thrown off of our tracks by the COVID and everything else that's happened in the last few years. And one of the things that's got thrown off tracks is we don't have connection and community, except where it's most convenient and where it doesn't cost us anything, and we don't have to get outside of our comfort zones, right? Are small groups the answer to everything? I don't think they are. I really don't. But I do know that there have been times in my life when I was genuinely lonely. See, I didn't grow up in a church family. When I came into the church, I came in through a youth group, not with my mom and dad beside me. And if I had not found a small group of young teenagers who were also new Christians, who brought me in and accepted me, even though I wasn't part of their group, I would not be here today. I know that before Candy and I got married, we lived in a place called Jewel Valley, Virginia. It's where some of the flooding that recently took place was in that area. It was so far back in the sticks that they had to have their sticks imported from other places, you know. And I was an outsider. Believe me, we were an outsider. Even when we tried to go to churches there, over the mountain from us into West Virginia, there was a snake handling church. We're not going there, okay? There was a church down the road, a crazy Pentecostal church. Not all Pentecostals are crazy. I love my Pentecostal brothers. But this one was crazy. We know because we would send some of our residents from our rest home there, and they would baptize them every week in the creek just because they said to. No one had the wisdom or discernment to say, you know, you don't have to be baptized again, Harold. But he'd come home wet, soaking wet every day. You know, kind of a crazy place. It was called Rosa Cole Pentecostal Holiness Church because they had misspelled holiness on their sign. Okay? We had a I love you Baptists too, but this was an independent Baptist, okay? There was an independent Baptist church down on the other end of the holler, and I went there one time, and the guy found out I was Nazarene, and Nazarenes recognize God's calling for women to preach the gospel, and he found that out. He knew I was Nazarene, and he wanted to let me know that real men of God are the man of the house, and he just preached the whole sermon right at me, and he said, you'll never be part of this church unless you deny what Nazarenes believe and be rebaptized. I'm like, well, God, I don't guess I belong here, right? Not only that, I brought Candy into that mess, She really loved me to move into a 2-room apartment inside a rest home. That's where I lived. in the sticks of Appalachia, okay? And that's where we lived. No churches around us. I remember one time we drove 80 miles to go to the church in Bluefield, West Virginia, Church of the Nazarene. Do you know that pastor? I'll never forget this. On Monday night, that pastor drove 80 miles back into those mountains to visit us. You remember that, Candy? Him and one of his people from the church. I wanted to go back, but it's just too far. 80 miles on a Sunday morning. We didn't know what to do. As a rest home, we oftentimes had groups from churches come in at Christmas and sing for our people, bring little treats and things, and there were a group of young people who, most of them had just gotten married like us, in their early, late 20s or something. And after they sang and all, we kind of liked them. We stood around talking and everything, and they said, we've been having trouble trying to connect with people at our church. The problem was their church was mostly older folks who couldn't relate to where they were coming from, who wanted more than tradition, And we decided that we'd start meeting together on Monday nights in one of their homes. And that, for the next 3 years, became our church. These were people like Junior and Sandy and Chris and Maya and Jake and Sister Barb, And we met on a couch in their house, in their living room. And God came and met with us and worked with us, and we grew so much during that time, so much so that 2 of those couples ended up in Bible college, us among them. Another one got called to missionary work in Africa, We saw the book of Acts happen right there in that little group where God met us and called us and sent us out from that group. I didn't have a church. That was my church. And it kept us in the faith. And in that time, God used that time of being in his presence with people who loved me and loved us to get us ready to go into ministry and to move off to Colorado Springs, you know. There they already had people waiting to meet us to be our small group, you know, already there. I know that I have sat in, as pastored, I have sat with people in small groups in the lunchroom of a trucking company where I taught the Gospel of Matthew through cigarette smoke. It's one of the best things ever. To see, it's so much more fun to shine light where it's kind of dark or smoky than it is in the bright light of the daytime. Jails and prisons, I've always been so shocked when the Holy Spirit shows up in the middle of a circle of inmates. He does. And God works there. You all know I've been in recovery groups where we all just kind of take the mask off and say, here's the place where I'm shriveled. You know, here's my shriveled hand. You know, this is who I am. And part about who I am is this broken part too. We don't hide that in recovery groups, you know. You all know about pub talks, and that became such an important place for some people who wouldn't come to church, but would come to the bar, you know. And they could have a beer or they could have a Coke. It really didn't matter. But we began to talk about not just small talk, but big talk, whether there's God or not. And how do we know that he loves us? And is there a place for me and his family? Community can't just be a group of people who like each other, agree with each other, and always get along. Jesus didn't form that kind of community, and he still doesn't. And I want to challenge you all to make room for diversity, to go find where community is happening and join it. You know, that's why I play disc golf these days. That community was already there, and I played enough, and they felt sorry enough for me, this old man, that they accepted me, and then I was able to tell them about Jesus. So we have disc disciples on Monday night there. To go beyond the Bible study, to have relationships beyond a Sunday school class, to take it outside the church house, to quit hiding in the institutional insulation that the church provides from the world. Instead, obey Christ and go into all the world to make disciples. So how would you do that? How do you obey Christ's call to not only be in community, but to help shape communities around Christ's presence? Well, let me throw out some ideas. These are things I think about sometimes. This really ought to be more fun than it is, instead of one more thing that you have to do. In fact, I don't think you need to do anything different. Maybe do it differently. Bring the party from the backyard to the front yard. Pull your grill out on the driveway. If you don't live so far out in the country that you don't have neighbors, but get people around there. Let Christ own your busy schedule. Say to him, okay, Lord, here it is. Lay it out there in front of him and say, help me. Let Christ guide you and lead you into new friendships. Lord, if this is something, what Pastor Mark's talking about is really something you want me to be about, tell me where to start. I don't even know where to start. And see what he does. Use your kids' sports times as times to do more than just watch the kids. Look for that person with the shriveled hand. It's sitting on the bleachers that nobody else is talking to. Be a friend. Make a friend. I've read stories of people who own boats, just starting to have devotions on their boat, and what do you know? Next thing you know, they've got a group called Jesus on the Lake, or Jesus in the Park, or one of the big things that God's doing across our country these days in response to COVID is dinner church, where people form a community that not only has a potluck, but actually cook together, spend that time together around their table, maybe not even weekly, but monthly, and inviting people into their home. a lunchtime group. We are called to be instigators of a community that's gathered around Jesus' presence. If somebody didn't do that in the past, you wouldn't be here. And as a church, I would challenge us to raise the bar on what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And we can lower the bar on what it means to do church. So how could you respond to this message today? Well, I would just want you to answer a couple questions. Do you want to be part of a community that's gathered around Jesus on purpose? Do you want to lead a group like that? Some of you can do that. You could do that so awesomely. Do it. You've just gotten inactive. You've done it before. You can do this. We can answer yes to the question of, I want to be more open so that Christ can use my property, my activities, and my relationships for his purposes, not just mine. And I want to pray and ask Christ to use me to form community. I'll say yes to those he chooses for me instead of being very picky. And I'll join any community he sets before me, and there I'll be a witness for Christ. If you'd say yes to any of those things this morning, I think we can kind of get in tune and on the path that Jesus led us on. I think we could see the Holy Spirit directing us. We could hear what the Spirit's saying to the churches in these days because he's saying something new. You know? And as pastors, a lot of what we need to do is get out of the way and let God use you to do his amazing work in our world. Let's stand together. Father, we thank you for calling us into this space today. You are the Lord of our community. You are the Lord of our relationships. You are the Lord of all that we are and all that we do. In fact, we offer our bodies to you as living sacrifices. That's our real act of worship. So would you take us and use us and direct us and guide us in the way that we can build new friendships, new relationships, new communities, new small groups, any way that we can be used by you to share the love of Christ in our world. It's your call. And if we say yes to it, we expect that you'll do something in response to show us where to begin. For this purpose, we give ourselves to you today, Christ. And it's in your name we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming this morning.